After 5 years of supporting my wife through business school, my wife told her sisters, "I don't think this marriage will last another year. He's falling so far below my level." They all laughed in agreement. I smiled. Why wait a year? Let's end it now. Then I left. That night, her sister sent a message that made my hands freeze. The wine glasses caught the light like tiny prisons of amber and gold, and I remember thinking how beautiful they looked. How deceptive beauty can be when it's just refracted light through something hollow. It was a Saturday in late October, one of those evenings where autumn pretends it might be kind before winter crushes that illusion entirely. Sarah's sisters had come over for dinner, which meant I'd spent the afternoon preparing a meal that would be criticized no matter how perfectly I executed it. Moroccan chicken with preserved lemons. Couscous, so light it could have been mistaken for clouds. A tart with figs I'd sourced from the farmer's market because Sarah mentioned, once, 3 weeks ago, that she missed the ones from that trip to Provence we took before everything changed. Before business school. Before the MBA that I worked 50-hour weeks to help fund. Before my wife started looking at me the way you look at furniture you're planning to replace. I stood in our kitchen, though I'd paid for the renovation, listening to the sound of laughter drifting in from the dining room. Sarah's voice rose above the others, that particular pitch it took on when she was performing, when she was holding court. "I'm just saying," Sarah was saying, and I could hear the wine in her voice, the looseness that came after the third glass. There are levels to life. And some people, they just plateau. More laughter. I recognized the distinct cackle of Jessica, the middle sister, the one who'd never worked a day in her life but had opinions about career trajectory that she dispensed like prophecies. Then Amanda's lower chuckle, more refined, more cruel. I plated the tart with the precision of someone who'd learned that perfection was the only acceptable standard in this house. Each slice exactly the same width. A small dollop of creme fraiche. A mint leaf that I'd grown myself in the herb garden I maintained because Sarah said fresh herbs made her feel European. 5 years, Sarah continued, and something in my chest went very still. 5 years I've been working on myself. Growing. Evolving. Building something. I stood there with the dessert plates growing cold in my hands. And he's just the same. Sweet, sure. Supportive, obviously. But there's no fire there. No ambition beyond his little teaching position. Do you know he turned down that corporate training opportunity last month? Said he preferred working with students. The contempt in that last word could have stripped paint. "I don't think this marriage will last another year," Sarah said, and her voice carried that confessional quality she used in her business presentations, that tone that said, "I'm being vulnerable with you, but really, I'm just being strategic. He's falling so far below my level." The laughter that followed wasn't surprise. It was agreement. I set the dessert plates down on the counter very carefully, the way you set down something precious before you do something irrevocable. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. 5 years of conditioning had taught them to be steady even when everything inside me was fracturing. I'd supported her through every late night, every study session, every crisis of confidence. I'd worked extra hours tutoring privately to cover the gap her partial scholarship didn't fill. I'd been the one to proofread every paper, to quiz her before every exam, to tell her she was brilliant when she doubted herself at 2 a.m. And I'd done it willingly, happily even, because I believed in her, because I thought we were building something together, because I loved her. The past tense of that thought should have hurt more than it did. I picked up the dessert plates again and walked into the dining room with the kind of calm that comes from a place beyond anger, beyond hurt. The place where clarity lives. All three of them looked up as I entered. Sarah's face was flushed from wine and confession, her eyes bright with the particular excitement of women who've just been tearing someone apart. Jessica was leaning back in her chair with that satisfied smirk she wore like jewelry. Amanda had her phone out, probably already texting their mother about poor Sarah's unfortunate marriage. "Dessert," I announced, setting plates in front of each of them. "Oh, thank you, honey," Sarah said automatically, that practiced sweetness she used in public, the voice that had nothing to do with the woman who'd just announced our marriage's expiration date to an audience. I placed her plate down with the same care I'd shown everything in our relationship, precise, intentional, doomed to be unappreciated. Then I smiled. It wasn't the smile they were used to. not the accommodating, understanding, supportive smile of a man who knew his place. This was something else, something that came from that crystalline place of clarity. I couldn't help but overhear, I said, my voice pleasant, conversational, about the marriage not lasting another year. Sarah's face went through several expressions very quickly: surprise, guilt, defiance, then a kind of defensive irritation that I dared to acknowledge what she'd said. You know what? I continued, still smiling, still pleasant. You're absolutely right. Why wait a year? I pulled off my wedding ring, the simple gold band I'd worn for 5 years, and set it on the table next to Sarah's dessert plate. It made a small sound, that ring hitting wood, the kind of sound that echoes. Let's end it now. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight, that has gravity. Jessica's smirk had frozen into something uncertain. Amanda had actually put her phone down. Sarah was staring at the ring like it was something dangerous. What are you? Sarah started. I've spent 5 years supporting you, I said, and my voice was still calm, still clear. 5 years working overtime to help fund your dreams. 5 years being your cheerleader, your editor, your emotional support system. 5 years believing we were partners. I looked at each of them in turn. Clearly, I was wrong about that. You're being dramatic, Jessica said, finding her voice, trying to reclaim control of the narrative. She didn't mean. She meant exactly what she said. I turned back to Sarah. You think I've plateaued? You think I lack ambition? You think I'm below your level? Sarah opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For once, the woman who could present business strategies to boardrooms without breaking a sweat had no words. Here's the thing about levels, I said. They're not real. They're just stories we tell ourselves to justify looking down on people we used to look up to. I turned to walk away, then stopped. The mortgage payment is due on the 1st, by the way. I assume your elevated level comes with the ability to handle that. And the utilities. And the car payment on that Audi you insisted we needed to look successful. Wait, Sarah said, and there was something like panic creeping into her voice. You can't just. I can, I said. And I am. Enjoy your dessert. I made it with preserved lemons from the farmer's market. The ones you loved in Provence. Back when you still loved me. I walked out of the dining room, out of the house, out of the life I'd built with a woman who'd measured my worth and found it wanting. My hands didn't shake until I was in my car. They shook a lot then. I drove to a hotel downtown without consciously deciding to. One of those places that caters to business travelers. Clean, impersonal, the kind of room that asks nothing of you and judges you for nothing. I paid for a week up front with the credit card I'd kept separate, the one she didn't know about, because I'd learned years ago to keep something back. Not because I was planning for this. Because somewhere, instinctively, I'd known I might need an exit strategy. Funny how we know things before we know them. The room was on the 8th floor with a view of the city lights that looked like stars if you squinted and pretended you were somewhere else. I sat on the edge of the bed. Perfectly made, impersonal, and stared at my phone. 17 missed calls from Sarah. 12 text messages. 4 from Jessica. 2 from Amanda. I didn't read any of them. Not yet. I needed this space, this silence, this moment where I could exist without performing. Do you know what it's like to realize you've been performing your entire marriage? That the person you thought you were, the supportive husband, the understanding partner, the man who loved unconditionally, was actually just a role you'd accepted because someone handed you the script and you didn't think to audition for anything else. I felt like an actor who'd just walked off stage mid-performance, and I couldn't tell if that made me brave or just finally, belatedly awake. My phone buzzed. Another text from Sarah. Against my better judgment, I opened it. You're overreacting. Come home so we can talk like adults. I laughed. Actually laughed. The sound came out harsh and unfamiliar in the quiet hotel room. Like adults. As if I'd been the child in this scenario. As if walking away from public humiliation and calculated cruelty was somehow immature. I typed a response and deleted it 3 times before settling on something simple. No. 1 word. 2 letters. The shortest complete sentence in English and the longest journey of my life. The phone rang immediately. Sarah. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Jessica this time. Voicemail. Amanda. Voicemail. Sarah again. Voicemail. I turned the phone face down and stared at the ceiling, at the textured acoustic tiles that looked like frozen television static. Somewhere in the city below, People were having normal Saturday nights. Fighting or fucking or doing both simultaneously the way couples do when they still have enough passion left for either. Going to movies, eating dinner, laughing without cruelty. Living in relationships that hadn't calcified into something unrecognizable. I thought about the last time Sarah and I had laughed together, really laughed, not the performed kind she did at dinner parties. I couldn't remember it. That should have been a warning sign months ago, years ago, back when warning signs might have mattered. The thing about slow erosion is that you don't notice it until the foundation collapses. My phone buzzed with a text. Not Sarah this time. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't open it. I should have known better. This is Amanda. You need to understand something about what happened tonight. I stared at that message for a long time. Amanda, the eldest sister, the one who'd married a hedge fund manager and lived in Connecticut like a character from a novel about people who use summer as a verb. Amanda, who'd always treated me with the kind of polite disdain you'd show a servant who'd forgotten their place. Another message came through. Sarah isn't the villain you're making her out to be. I almost threw the phone. Almost. Instead, I took a breath that felt like swallowing glass and typed. I heard what she said. What you all said. I don't need it explained. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. You heard one conversation. You don't understand the context. What context makes it okay to mock your spouse to his face? She was venting. We all do it. You're being sensitive. There it was. The gaslight switch flipped with the casual ease of someone who'd done this dance before. Your feelings aren't valid. Your hurt isn't real. You're overreacting to something that wasn't even that bad, really, if you think about it from our perspective. She said our marriage won't last another year. That I'm below her level. With all of you laughing. That's not venting. That's contempt. The dots appeared and disappeared several times. Then, there's something you need to know. Something that might make you reconsider this dramatic exit of yours. My hands went cold. There was something in that message, a threat disguised as concern, a trap wrapped in the pretense of revelation. What? I hated myself for asking. Hated the part of me that still needed to know, that couldn't just walk away clean. Not over text. This is too important. Can we meet tomorrow? Just you and me. I promise it will change how you see things. I stared at that message until the words stopped making sense, until they were just shapes on a screen, symbols that could mean anything or nothing. Every instinct I had screamed at me not to engage, to block the number, to protect myself from whatever game this was. But there was another voice, quieter, more insistent. What if you don't know the whole story? What if there's something that explains this? What if you're making the biggest mistake of your life? It was the voice of a man who'd spent 5 years accommodating, understanding, giving the benefit of the doubt. The voice of someone who'd been trained to question his own perception. Where and when? I sent it before I could stop myself. Coffee shop on Westheimer. 10 a.m. Thank you for being willing to listen. I set the phone down and immediately wanted to take it back, to unsend that agreement. But it was too late, and maybe that was the theme of this entire disaster. Realizing too late that you'd given away something you couldn't get back. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in that hotel bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, headlights from passing cars creating temporary constellations that dissolved as quickly as they formed, and I thought about all the moments I'd ignored in favor of hope. The way Sarah stopped asking about my day 6 months ago. The way she'd started introducing me at her business school events as my husband, with the same tone people used to say my obligation. The way she'd stopped saying we and started saying I. The way love had become logistics and partnership had become performance, and I'd kept pretending not to notice because noticing would have meant doing something about it. Inertia is powerful, comfortable, safe, until it kills you. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Another text from an unknown number. Different from Amanda's. I should have ignored it. I'm sorry you had to hear that. Simple, direct, no signature. But I knew the voice in that text the way you know a song from the first 3 notes. Vanessa, Sarah's youngest sister. The one who'd been quiet at dinner. The one I'd forgotten was even there because she had this way of fading into corners, of existing without demanding acknowledgement. I typed back without thinking. Were you there? Yes. In the kitchen. I was getting more wine when it started. By the time I came back in, it was too late to stop it. You could have defended me. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared 3 times before the response came. I know. I should have. I'm a coward. I'm sorry. Something about that message, the plainness of it, the lack of justification or excuse, made my throat tight. Why are you texting me? Because someone should have said something. And because Amanda is going to tell you something tomorrow that isn't true. She's going to try to manipulate you into staying, into thinking this is somehow your fault. My hands froze around the phone. What is she going to tell me? I can't say over text. But I needed you to know, whatever she tells you, ask for proof. Don't just believe it because it comes from family. Family can be the cruelest liars. That's cryptic as hell. I know. I'm sorry. But I can't say more. Not yet. Just be careful tomorrow. And know that not everyone in Sarah's family thinks you're beneath her. Some of us think she's beneath you. The message ended there. I waited for more, but nothing came. I stared at the phone until the screen went dark, then stared at my reflection in the black mirror of it. Gaunt, exhausted, a stranger who'd been living in my skin for 5 years without permission. What the fuck is happening? I said to that stranger. He didn't answer. He never did. The coffee shop on Westheimer was one of those aggressively hip places that served pour-overs like they were sacraments and charged $8 for the privilege. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, baristas with forearm tattoos and opinions about beans sourced from single-origin farms in Guatemala. I arrived 20 minutes early because I needed the caffeine and because sitting still in that hotel room for one more second would have been intolerable. I ordered something dark and bitter that matched my mood and sat in a corner where I could see the door. An old habit from teaching. Always know your exits. Always see who's coming. Amanda arrived exactly on time, which was somehow both predictable and irritating. She wore athleisure that probably cost more than my car payment, or what used to be my car payment, since I'd apparently just abdicated all financial responsibility in a moment of clarity that was starting to feel more like insanity. She scanned the coffee shop with the imperious gaze of someone used to being catered to, spotted me, and approached with the kind of smile that was meant to be disarming but just looked calculated. "Thank you for coming," she said, sliding into the seat across from me like she was doing me a favor. "Let's skip the pleasantries," I said. "You said there was something I needed to know." Amanda's smile tightened. She didn't like being rushed, didn't like losing control of the pacing. "You're angry. I understand. What you heard last night was hurtful. Was it untrue?" She paused. "It was taken out of context." "Then provide the context." Amanda took a breath, and I could see her recalculating her approach, shifting strategies like someone playing chess against an opponent who'd just made an unexpected move. "Sarah is under tremendous pressure," she began. "The business school program, the internship applications, the networking events. She's building a career from scratch at 32, which is already behind the curve in her field. She's stressed. She said things she didn't mean to an audience she thought was safe. Her sisters aren't a safe audience. We're family. We're supposed to be able to vent to each other without the spouse finding out, without consequences." I leaned forward. "Here's what I think, Amanda. I think Sarah meant every word she said. I think she's been feeling this way for months, maybe years. And I think last night wasn't venting. It was rehearsal." Amanda's expression flickered. Something like respect crossed her face before she shuddered it. "You're more perceptive than she gives you credit for," Amanda said, and the admission felt like a trap. "Which is why I'm going to be honest with you. That would be a refreshing change." She ignored the barb. "Sarah is having an affair." The words hit like a physical thing. Like something solid that displaced air and made breathing suddenly complicated. I must have made some sound. Not quite a word. Not quite a gasp, because Amanda reached across the table like she might touch my hand before thinking better of it. "I'm sorry," she said, and for the first time. She sounded almost genuine. "I told her to tell you herself. I told her months ago that this was going to end badly. But she kept saying she needed to figure out her feelings first. And then it was, I need to finish the semester. And then it was, I need to get through recruiting. And the excuses kept coming and the affair kept happening, and here we are." I stared at her. Through her, at the exposed brick wall behind her that someone had paid good money to make look deliberately unfinished. "Who?" I managed to say. "One of her study group partners. Daniel. He's already placed at McKinsey, starting after graduation. He's what she thinks she needs to become the person she's trying to be." "How long?" "Since spring semester. 8 months, give or take. 8 months. Almost a year. A year of coming home to me." of letting me work extra hours to support her dreams, of letting me cook dinner and proofread her papers and believe we had a future. A year of lies so extensive they become their own kind of truth. Why are you telling me this? I asked, and my voice sounded distant, like it was coming from somewhere else. Because she's planning to ask for a divorce anyway, but she wants to wait until after she graduates and has a job lined up. She wants to keep the house, the car, everything. She wants you to keep supporting her until she doesn't need you anymore. And then she wants you to leave quietly with whatever scraps she decides to throw you. And you're telling me this out of the goodness of your heart. Amanda had the grace to look uncomfortable. I'm telling you this because I don't like being an accomplice to cruelty. And because you deserve to know that if you come back, if you let her talk you into trying to work on the marriage, it's all theater. She's already gone. She's just using you for the funding. I sat back in my chair. The coffee had gone cold in my hand. Proof, I said. What? I want proof. I'm not taking your word for this. For all I know, this is a new strategy. Poison me against Sarah completely, so I walk away without a fight, and she gets everything anyway. Amanda's jaw tightened. She reached into her designer bag, something Italian, probably more expensive than my monthly salary, and pulled out her phone. I thought you might say that. She turned the screen toward me. Text messages. Screenshots from Sarah's phone that Amanda had apparently photographed. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. I didn't read them all. I couldn't. But I read enough. He's working late again. We could meet at my place. I told him I was studying. He never questions it. Sometimes I feel guilty. Then I remember how boring my life would be if I stayed. After graduation. After I have the offer letter. Then I'll end it cleanly. There were others. Worse ones. Messages where she discussed me like I was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be managed. Where she laughed about my naivety. Where she and Daniel made plans for a future that didn't include the husband who was funding her present. I pushed the phone back across the table. How did you get those? She left her phone unlocked at Mom's house last month. I saw a message come through from Daniel. I started scrolling. I took screenshots because I knew eventually someone would need to know the truth. You've known for a month. Yes. And you didn't tell me. No. Why now? Amanda sighed. She looked, for just a moment, like an actual human being instead of a perfectly curated image of one. Because last night crossed a line, she said. Mocking you to your face while you served us dinner you'd spent all day cooking? That's not just infidelity. That's sadism. And I might be a lot of things. Shallow, judgmental, complicit, but I'm not going to sit there and watch my sister torture a good man for her own entertainment. I'm not a good man, I said quietly. I'm just someone who loved the wrong person. Those aren't mutually exclusive. We sat in silence. Around us, the coffee shop hummed with the sounds of other people's normal lives. Laptop keyboards clicking, the hiss of the espresso machine, conversations about nothing important, which was its own kind of blessing. What do I do now? I asked, not really expecting an answer. That's up to you. You could fight her in the divorce. Use the affair as leverage. You'd probably get a better settlement. I don't want her money. Then what do you want? I thought about that. Really thought about it. I want her to know that I know. I want her to understand that she didn't get away with it. That her carefully planned exit strategy failed because someone decided to do the right thing. Amanda nodded slowly. And then I want to never see her again for the rest of my life. That's fair. She stood up, gathering her bag. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About all of it. Are you going to tell her we talked? Eventually. But not today. Consider it a head start. She walked out, leaving me alone with cold coffee and the shattered remnants of 5 years. My phone buzzed. Vanessa, did you meet with Amanda? Yes. What did she tell you? That Sarah's having an affair. That she's been using me. That she's planning to leave anyway. 3 dots appeared and disappeared. Appeared again. Then. It's true. All of it. I'm sorry. You knew too. Yes. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. I was afraid of breaking up the family. The family broke itself. I know. For what it's worth, I'm glad you know now. And I'm glad you left. You deserve better than this. I stared at that message. At the kindness in it. At the absurdity of Sarah's youngest sister. The one I'd barely noticed at dinner parties. The one who faded into corners. Being the only one who seemed to genuinely care about my well-being. Thank you. That means more than you know. What are you going to do now? I looked at that question for a long time. What was I going to do? I could crawl back. I could pretend I didn't know. I could be the understanding husband for a few more months while Sarah finished her degree and landed her job and executed her carefully planned exit. Or I could burn it all down. Or, and this was the option that was slowly crystallizing in my mind, I could do something else entirely. Something quiet. Something elegant. Something that would make sure Sarah understood exactly what she'd lost. I'm going to teach her about levels, I typed, and about the difference between them and worth. People always underestimated teachers. It's one of the few professions where society simultaneously insists you're vital and treats you like you're disposable. We're supposed to be selfless martyrs who work for passion instead of money, who give everything and expect nothing, who exist in this noble poverty that makes everyone else feel better about paying us like we're glorified babysitters. Sarah had bought into that narrative completely. What she didn't know, what she'd never bothered to learn, was that I'd never been just a teacher. I was a teacher who'd gotten very good at working within systems, at understanding how institutions functioned, at finding opportunities that existed in the gaps between what people assumed and what actually was. She thought I'd turned down that corporate training opportunity because I lacked ambition. I turned it down because I'd already built something better. Monday morning, I drove to the bank. Not the one where Sarah and I had our joint account, but the other one. The one she didn't know about because she'd stopped asking questions about my finances 3 years ago, right around the time she decided I was boring. Mr. Chun, the branch manager said, standing up when I walked into his office. Good to see you. How can I help you today? I need to move some assets, I said. And I need to do it quietly. His eyebrows went up slightly, but he was too professional to pry. Of course. What were you thinking? I'd started the side consulting business 6 years ago, before Sarah started business school. Executive coaching for teachers transitioning into administration. Curriculum design for corporate training programs. Professional development workshops for schools that actually had money to spend on improving their faculty. It had started small, a few $100s here and there. Beer money, gas money, but I was good at it. Better than good. I understood how to communicate complex ideas simply. I knew how to make people feel capable without being condescending. I had a gift for seeing potential in systems and people that others overlooked. The business had grown quietly, steadily, while I'd continued teaching full-time because I actually loved teaching. The money had accumulated in an account Sarah knew nothing about, because she'd made it clear early on that my little side projects weren't worth discussing. I want to move everything from the consulting account into a trust, I told the manager. Something that protects the assets in case of divorce. He nodded slowly. How much are we talking about? $340,000, give or take. His expression stayed professionally neutral, but I saw the flash of respect. That was more than most teachers made in 5 years. Hell, it was more than Sarah would make in her first 2 years at whatever consulting firm hired her. That can definitely be arranged. May I ask about the timeline? Immediately. Today, if possible. And I need the documentation to be airtight. Are you expecting the divorce to be contentious? I thought about Sarah's text messages. About her laughing with Daniel about my naivety. About her plan to keep using me until she didn't need me anymore. Let's just say I'm expecting my wife to be surprised. He smiled, not unkindly. I'll make some calls. We can have this set up by end of business today. Good. And I need one more thing. Name it. I need a full accounting of every deposit I've made into our joint accounts over the last 5 years. Every mortgage payment. Every utility bill. Every expense that came from my income. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Building a case. Building a truth. There's a difference. I'll have my assistant pull the records. This might take a few days to be comprehensive. That's fine. I'm patient. It was true. I'd spent 5 years being patient. Being supportive. Being the man who waited for his wife to notice his worth. I could be patient a little longer while I demonstrated it. The house felt different when I went back to pack my things. Colder. Or maybe I was just seeing it clearly for the first time. The house I'd paid for while Sarah pursued her dreams, filled with furniture I'd assembled, decorated with art I'd chosen, because she was always too busy to care about those details. Sarah's car wasn't in the driveway. She'd texted me that morning, a long, rambling message about how we needed to talk, how I'd overreacted, how she didn't really mean what I thought I'd heard. I'd responded with a single word, later. It was amazing how much power lived in that word when you stopped being available, when you stopped accommodating, When you made someone wait for your attention instead of giving it freely. I packed systematically. Clothes, books, the few personal items that mattered. Photos from before Sarah, mementos from my parents, things that had nothing to do with this marriage and everything to do with who I'd been before I met her. I left the wedding photos on the mantle. I left the expensive coffee maker I'd bought her for her birthday. I left everything that represented the us we'd pretended to be. In the office, my office, really, since Sarah had claimed the larger one for her studies, I gathered my files. Tax returns, pay stubs, the documentation of every contribution I'd made to our shared life. In the back of the filing cabinet, I found something that made me pause. A folder labeled MBA expenses. I'd kept meticulous records because I was a teacher and teachers are nothing if not organized. Every tuition payment, every textbook, every fee, $127,000 over 2 years. I'd paid $127,000 towards Sarah's MBA while working a teacher's salary and building a consulting business she'd dismissed as a cute hobby. I took photos of every page with my phone, uploaded them to a secure cloud account, made backups of the backups. Then I locked the office door and left the key on the kitchen counter. My phone rang as I was loading the last box into my car. Sarah. I considered not answering, but that felt cowardly, and whatever else I wasn't going to be a coward about this. Hello. Where are you? Her voice was tight, controlled. Her business voice. We need to talk. I'm at the house. Packing. You can't just move out. This is insane. Can you please stop being dramatic and come back so we can discuss this like adults? There was that phrase again. Like adults. As if the adult thing to do was let her continue lying to me. I don't think we have anything to discuss, I said. Of course we do. You walked out in the middle of. I walked out after you told your sisters our marriage was going to end because I'm beneath you. What exactly should we discuss? The timeline of my inadequacy? Silence. Then, you weren't supposed to hear that. But I did. And now we're here. I was drunk. I was venting. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Amanda told me about Daniel. More silence. Longer this time. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Could almost feel her recalculating, shifting strategies, trying to find the angle that would let her regain control. Amanda had no right. Amanda had every right. Someone needed to tell me the truth since you apparently weren't planning to. It's not what you think. Really? Because I saw the text messages, Sarah. I saw where you called me boring. Where you made plans to leave after you graduate. Where you laughed about how I never question when you say you're studying. Those were taken out of context. Stop. My voice came out harder than I'd intended. Just stop. I'm done with the gaslighting. I'm done pretending I don't see what's right in front of me. You want a divorce? Fine. You'll get one. But you don't get to control the narrative anymore. What does that mean? It means I'm getting a lawyer. It means I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who paid for your MBA. It means your plan to keep me around as a checkbook until you're done using me isn't going to work. You can't. I can. And I am. You wanted someone on your level, Sarah? Congratulations. You're about to find out what level I'm actually on. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking again, but this time it felt different. Not fear. Not even anger. Power. The power of someone who'd finally stopped accommodating and started acting. The lawyer's office was in a converted Victorian house that somehow managed to look both professional and vaguely threatening. Darkwood paneling. Leather chairs that creaked with authority. Framed degrees on the wall like trophies. Melissa Park was 45, Yale Law, and had a reputation for being ruthless in divorce cases. She was also expensive, $4.50 an hour expensive, but I wasn't worried about the cost anymore. Funny how your priorities shift when you stop pretending you're poor. Mr. Chun, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. You said on the phone this was urgent. My wife is having an affair. She's planning to divorce me after she graduates from business school. She wants to take the house, the cars, everything. And she wants me to keep funding her life until she's ready to leave. Melissa's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. Do you have proof of the affair? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots Amanda had given me. She read through them methodically, her face unreadable. These are from your sister-in-law's phone. Yes. She photographed them from my wife's phone. That's ethically complicated. They might not be admissible in court, but they're good for establishing a pattern. She looked up. What else do you have? I'd come prepared. I'd been preparing for 3 days. In fact, since that coffee shop meeting with Amanda, I'd barely slept. I'd been too busy building my case. Financial records showing every contribution I've made to the marriage over 5 years. $127,000 in direct payments toward her MBA. All the mortgage payments. I've been paying them from my account since year 2. Utility bills, car payments, insurance. I can document exactly how much I've put into this marriage versus what she's contributed. Melissa leaned back in her chair. You've been thorough. I'm a teacher. We're good at documentation. She almost smiled. Any commingled assets? The house is in both our names, but I've made 95% of the payments. Her car is in her name only, but I've been paying the note. We have a joint checking account with about $3,000 in it. That's it. Children? No. Good. That simplifies things. She pulled out a legal pad. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to file for divorce immediately before she does. We're going to claim fraud and request reimbursement for the MBA expenses. We're going to document every financial contribution you've made and argue for an unequal division of assets in your favor. Can we win that? In Texas? Maybe. It's a community property state, which means normally everything gets split 50-50. But we can argue fraud. We can argue that she was unjustly enriched by your contributions while planning to leave, and we can absolutely make her life uncomfortable enough that she settles favorably just to make it stop. She looked at me directly. The question is, do you want to fight, or do you want to be done with this? I've been asking myself that question for 3 days. I want her to understand what she did. I want her to know that I'm not some doormat she can discard when I'm no longer useful. I want her to face consequences. Then we fight. Melissa's smile was sharp. Fair warning, this is going to get ugly. She's going to claim you're being vindictive. Her family is going to hate you. It's going to cost money and time and emotional energy. I understand. Do you? Because a lot of people say they want to fight, and then they fold when it gets hard. When their ex starts crying. When the family starts calling them unreasonable. When they start second-guessing themselves. I thought about Sarah's text messages. About her laughing about my naivety. About her plan to use me until I was empty. I won't fold. Good. She pulled out a contract. Then let's begin. The divorce papers were served to Sarah at her business school during a networking event she'd been planning for months. I didn't do it to be cruel. I did it to be efficient. And maybe, just maybe, to give her a taste of what public humiliation felt like. Vanessa texted me the next day with a report that felt like vindication and guilt in equal measure. She was giving a presentation on leadership. The process server walked up right as she was finishing. She had to sign for them in front of 60 students and 15 recruiters. How did she react? Professionally in the moment. Went to the bathroom afterward and didn't come out for 20 minutes. Jessica is furious. Says you're vindictive. And you? I think you're being honest. That scares people who've been lying. I appreciated Vanessa more than I could express. In the wreckage of this family, she was the only one who seemed to understand that honesty wasn't cruelty. It was just uncomfortable. Sarah called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. She texted me essays, long, rambling messages that swung between fury and pleading, between accusations and apologies, between threats and promises. I read them all, documented them, forwarded them to Melissa, but I didn't respond. There's a particular kind of power in silence, in refusing to engage, in letting someone scream into a void and hear only their own echo. Teachers know this. When a student is having a tantrum, you don't engage. You wait. You let them burn through their fury until they're ready to actually communicate. Sarah wasn't ready yet, but she would be. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, Melissa filed a motion to freeze all joint assets and require full financial disclosure from both parties. She's going to fight this, Melissa warned me. She's going to claim you're being unreasonable, that you're punishing her for wanting a divorce. Let her. She'll hire a good lawyer, probably someone from her family's network. They'll try to paint you as the bitter husband who can't accept that the marriage is over. I can accept that the marriage is over. I can't accept being defrauded. Good. Keep that energy. Melissa looked at me over her glasses. You're doing better than most people in your position. What do you mean? Most people crumble. They want their ex back even after everything. They convince themselves it wasn't that bad. They accept terrible settlements because they're afraid of being alone. She paused. You're not doing that. Should I be? No, but it's unusual. Most people haven't processed the end of their marriage in 3 days. I processed it over 5 years, I said. I just didn't realize it until recently. Discovery in a divorce is its own kind of torture. It's where you have to hand over every financial document, every text message, every email that might be relevant to the case. Where your entire life gets examined and itemized and reduced to evidence. Sarah's lawyer was exactly what I'd expected. A shark in a designer suit named Richard Montgomery, who worked for a downtown firm that represented Fortune 500 companies. He was expensive, aggressive, and probably on Amanda's husband's retainer. His opening move was to request 5 years of my financial records, tax returns, and employment history. Melissa smiled when she saw the request. He's fishing. He assumes you're hiding something. I'm not hiding anything. Good. Then we'll bury him in documentation. Every penny you've earned, every dollar you've spent, every contribution you've made to this marriage. If he wants transparency, we'll give him more than he can process. We did exactly that. Delivered 6 boxes of meticulously organized financial records, highlighted and annotated, showing exactly how much I'd contributed to our joint life, while Sarah had been busy leveling up. In exchange, we requested her financial records, her academic transcripts, her internship offers, and, most importantly, all communications with Daniel Rivera, her study partner and affair partner. Richard tried to block that last one, filed a motion claiming it was irrelevant to the financial aspects of the divorce. Melissa's response brief was a thing of beauty. She argued that the affair was directly relevant to Sarah's claim that our marriage had ended due to incompatibility rather than infidelity, and that Sarah's financial planning around the affair, including her decision to delay divorce until after securing employment, demonstrated a pattern of calculated deception that should impact asset division. The judge agreed. Sarah was ordered to turn over all communications with Daniel. According to Vanessa, she cried for 2 hours after getting that order. I felt less satisfaction from that than I'd expected. Not because I felt guilty, but because I was starting to realize that this wasn't about hurting Sarah. It was about making sure the truth was visible. About ensuring that when this was over, no one could say I was the villain in this story. The communications between Sarah and Daniel were worse than I'd imagined. Not because they were explicitly sexual, though some were, but because they were casual, routine. The affair wasn't some passionate escape from an unhappy marriage. It was just convenient. Easy. She'd talk about her day, her classes, her stress about recruiting. And then, in the same paragraph, can't meet tonight, husband's home early. Like I was a scheduling conflict. There were hundreds of messages. Going back 8 months, just like Amanda had said. Making plans. Laughing about inside jokes. Building the foundation of a relationship while I was home cooking dinner and reviewing her case study presentations. Melissa put them in a binder. A thick one. Organized chronologically with tabs and highlights. This is your evidence, she said. This is what proves she was planning this. That she used you. I flipped through it once. Just once. Then I closed it and pushed it away. I don't need to read it again, I said. You might need to for trial. Then I'll read it for trial. But not now. She nodded, understanding. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. This is crueler than most. Is it? Or is it just more documented? That's a depressing thought. Welcome to my life for the past 5 years. Sarah's lawyer requested mediation. It was a standard move. Courts prefer couples to settle rather than go to trial. Cheaper for everyone. Faster. Less public. We met in a conference room at a neutral law office. Beige walls. A long table. Bad coffee in a pot that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton administration. Sarah walked in looking diminished. Smaller. Her MBA power suit seemed to hang on her differently, like armor that had failed its purpose. She didn't look at me. We sat on opposite sides of the table with our lawyers flanking us like seconds in a duel. The mediator was a woman in her 60s named Patricia who had the weary air of someone who'd seen every permutation of human failure and stopped being surprised decades ago. Let's begin, she said. The goal today is to see if we can reach an agreement on asset division, debt allocation, and any spousal support without going to trial. Mr. Montgomery, why don't you start with your proposal? Richard leaned forward with the confidence of someone used to winning. My client is requesting an equal division of all marital assets per Texas community property law. This includes the house, vehicles, and any retirement accounts. She's also requesting temporary spousal support of $3,000 per month for 2 years to help her transition from student to professional life. I almost laughed. Actually felt the laugh bubble up in my throat before I swallowed it. Melissa didn't bother hiding her reaction. That's fascinating. Let me present an alternative proposal. She slid a folder across the table. That's a complete financial accounting of every contribution Mr. Chun made to this marriage. $127,000 in direct payments toward Mrs. Chin's MBA. An additional $94,000 in mortgage payments, utility bills, car payments, and other expenses that he paid while Mrs. Chun was in school full-time. Richard opened the folder. His expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten. That's $221,000 over 5 years, Melissa continued. Mr. Chin's position is that Mrs. Chun unjustly benefited from his financial support while conducting an 8-month affair and planning to divorce him once her degree was complete. He's requesting reimbursement of 75% of his contributions, $165,000, plus retention of all separate property, including his consulting business, which Mrs. Chun was unaware of during the marriage. Sarah's head snapped up at that. What consulting business? It was the first time she'd spoken. The first time she'd looked at me. I met her eyes. The one I started 6 years ago. The one you called a cute hobby and stopped asking about because it wasn't relevant to your plans. You never told me. You never asked. You assumed that because I was a teacher, I was barely scraping by. You assumed my finances were simple because you decided I was simple. You were wrong. Richard held up a hand. Let's stay focused. The existence of a separate business is irrelevant to the division of marital assets. Actually, Melissa said, it's completely relevant. It demonstrates that Mr. Chun had the financial resources to support Mrs. Chin's education without compromising his own financial security. It also demonstrates that Mrs. Chin's narrative of having outgrown her husband was based on false assumptions about his capabilities and ambition. This is about money, Richard said. Not ego. This is about fraud, Melissa countered. About a spouse who systematically deceived her partner while extracting financial support for personal advancement. The money is just how we measure the damages. Patricia, the mediator, sighed. Let's take a break. Mrs. Chun, Mr. Chun, I'd like to speak with you separately. I met with Patricia alone in a side room that looked like it was normally used for storage. Boxes of old files. A water cooler that gurgled ominously. You're angry, she said. It wasn't a question. I'm clear. Those aren't mutually exclusive. She sat down across from me. I've been doing this for 23 years. I can usually tell within the first 15 minutes if a couple is going to settle or go to war. You too? You're going to war. Is that a problem? It's expensive, emotionally and financially. And in my experience, nobody wins wars. They just get to pick which losses they can live with. Maybe that's enough. She studied me. What do you actually want here? Because if it's to make her suffer, you've already succeeded. She's devastated. I want her to understand consequences. I want her to know that you can't use people without eventually having to answer for it. I want the truth to be visible. The truth, Patricia repeated. Here's a truth for you. You can win this case. You can get your money back. You can make sure everyone knows she cheated and lied and used you. And you'll still be a divorced man who spent a year of his life proving a point instead of moving forward. So I should just let it go? Let her keep everything she stole? I'm not saying that. I'm asking what's actually going to make you feel better. Because in my experience, revenge rarely does. I thought about that. About what I wanted. I want her to acknowledge what she did, I said finally. Not in court. Not in legal filings. I want her to actually say it. To take responsibility. Just once. Patricia nodded. That's more honest than most people manage. Let me talk to her. We reconvened an hour later. Sarah looked like she'd been crying. Her makeup was smudged, her power suit wrinkled. She looked younger, somehow. More like the woman I'd married before business school taught her to armor herself. My client, Richard began, but Sarah held up a hand. I need to say something. Richard looked alarmed. Sarah, I don't think. I need to say it. She looked at me directly for the first time since that dinner party. You're right. About all of it. I did use you. I did take you for granted. I convinced myself it was okay because I was building something, because I was stressed, because you seemed content with the way things were. But that was just me justifying being a terrible person. She swallowed hard. The affair with Daniel it wasn't even about him. It was about me proving I could be someone else. Someone more impressive. Someone who dated management consultants instead of teachers. And I told myself it was okay to lie to you because our marriage was already over, because you deserved better anyway, because I was doing you a favor by planning a clean exit. Tears were running down her face now. But I wasn't doing you a favor. I was being a coward. And cruel. And I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry for all of it. The room was very quiet. I can't give you back the 5 years, she continued. I can't undo the humiliation or the lying or the fact that I let you support me while I was planning to leave. But I can acknowledge it. I can stop fighting you on this. I can agree that you deserve better than 50-50 of something you paid for 80% of. Richard looked like he was going to have an aneurysm. Sarah, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He does deserve better. She looked at Melissa. What does he want? Melissa glanced at me. I nodded. $150,000 reimbursement, Melissa said. Plus his consulting business stays separate. Plus he keeps his retirement accounts. You keep the house if you can afford the mortgage alone. The car in your name stays yours. The joint checking account gets split 50-50. No spousal support in either direction. That's more than fair, Sarah said before Richard could object. Sarah, it's done, Richard. Draw up the papers. We signed the settlement 3 weeks later in Melissa's office. No fanfare. No drama. Just two people putting their signatures on documents that legally ended what had emotionally ended months, or maybe years, ago. Sarah looked at me as we stood to leave. Can I ask you something? Melissa and Richard had stepped out to give us a moment of privacy. It felt strange, being alone with her after everything. Like standing in a house you used to live in. Familiar, but fundamentally foreign. What? Why didn't you just take everything? You could have. I wouldn't have blamed you. I thought about that. Because this isn't about punishment. It's about equity. I want fair compensation for what I contributed. Not revenge. That's very level of you. She smiled slightly, sadly. I guess I was wrong about that, too. Yeah, you were. She nodded, accepting that. For what it's worth, I hope you find someone who appreciates you, who sees you clearly, who doesn't need you to prove your worth every single day. I hope the same for you, I said, and meant it. I hope you find whatever it is you were looking for. I just hope you don't destroy anyone else while you're looking. That's fair. She picked up her bag. Goodbye, then. Goodbye, Sarah. She walked out of the office, out of my life, and I felt. Not relief, exactly. Not joy, but something close to peace. The kind that comes from knowing you stood up for yourself. That you didn't accept less than you deserved. That you taught one final lesson to someone who thought she'd graduated beyond needing them. Vanessa met me for coffee the following week. The same coffee shop where Amanda had told me about the affair, because apparently my life had become very circular. How are you doing? She asked. Better. Lighter. I took a sip of actually good coffee this time. I'd learned the place had decent Ethiopian beans if you asked. How's the family? Tense. Jessica still thinks you're vindictive. Amanda feels guilty, which is new for her. Mom is confused. Dad is quietly proud of you, though he'd never say it. And Sarah? Broken. Then rebuilding. She moved in with Daniel, but I don't think it's going well. Turns out being someone's escape isn't the same as being their partner. That's unfortunate. Is it? Vanessa smiled. You don't sound convinced. I'm not hoping she fails, but I'm also not hoping she succeeds. I'm just done caring about her trajectory one way or another. That's healthy. It's something. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Outside, the city moved through its rhythms. People rushing to work, to appointments, to lives that had nothing to do with mine. Can I ask you something? Vanessa said. Sure. Why were you so calm through all of this? Most people would have been destroyed. Or at least messy. I thought about that question. Really thought about it. Because I spent 5 years accommodating someone else's definition of success. 5 years making myself smaller so she could feel bigger. And when it ended, I realized I'd been holding myself to her measurements instead of my own. I looked at Vanessa. She thought I was beneath her because I was a teacher. Because I didn't have the prestige or the salary or the ambition she valued. But I was never beneath her. I was just measuring my worth by her broken ruler. And now Now I'm using my own measurements, and I'm doing pretty well by them. Vanessa smiled. I'm glad. You deserve that. We all do, I said. The trick is believing it before someone convinces you otherwise. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood in front of my new apartment and felt something I hadn't felt in years: anticipation. It was a small place, 10th floor of a downtown building with a view of the river and enough space for me and the life I was building. I'd furnished it simply. Good pieces, chosen carefully, nothing that reminded me of before. The consulting business had grown significantly once I stopped hiding it. Turns out when you actually market yourself instead of treating your expertise as a cute hobby, people take you seriously. I'd hired 2 associate consultants. We had contracts with 3 school districts and 2 corporate clients. It wasn't McKinsey money, but it was mine, and it was meaningful, and it was enough. More than enough. I'd also started teaching a graduate seminar at the local university. Educational leadership and organizational psychology. The dean had called it a coup to bring someone with my combination of classroom experience and consulting background onto the faculty. Sarah would have been proud, I thought. Then corrected myself. Sarah would have found some way to diminish it. But that was her problem now, not mine. Vanessa came over to help me christen the new place. She brought wine. Good wine, not the cheap stuff we'd served at those terrible dinner parties. And we sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the river in shades of amber and rose. This is nice, she said. Really nice. You did good. Thanks. It feels right. Better than the house. So much better. That house always felt like a museum. Beautiful, but untouchable. This feels like a home. She nodded. Sarah's selling it, by the way. Can't afford the mortgage on her starting salary. Even with Daniel helping. They're still together? Barely. According to Jessica's gossip network, they fight constantly. Turns out having an affair is easier than having a relationship. I should have felt satisfied by that. Some part of me had wanted Sarah to fail, to understand what she'd lost. But sitting there on my balcony with good wine and better company, I just felt neutral. I hope they figure it out, I said. Really? Or I hope they don't and both move on to something healthier. Either way, I hope they stop hurting each other. Vanessa looked at me with something like admiration. You're a better person than I am. I'm just tired of carrying anger around. It's heavy. How very teacher of you. Profound and slightly annoying. I laughed. Actually laughed. Fair. We watched the sunset in comfortable silence. Below us, the city hummed with Friday evening energy. People heading to dinners, dates, lives that were messy and complicated and theirs. Can I tell you something? Vanessa said after a while. Of course. I was jealous of Sarah. Growing up, she was always the successful one. The ambitious one. The one who was going places. And I was just quiet. Forgettable. The sister who faded into corners. You're not forgettable. Thank you for saying that. But my point is, watching you stand up to her, watching you refuse to accept her measurements of worth, that taught me something. That success isn't about how loud you are or how impressive your job title is. It's about knowing your value and not negotiating it down for someone else's comfort. That's very wise. I had a good teacher. We clinked glasses. The wine caught the last of the sunset light, and I thought about how different everything looked when you stopped seeing it through someone else's eyes. A year after the divorce, I got an email that made me stop and read twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. It was from Sarah. Subject: amends. I know I have no right to contact you. You probably don't want to hear from me, and I completely understand if you delete this without reading. But my therapist suggested I might try to make amends to people I've hurt, and you're at the top of that list. I've spent the last year trying to understand what happened to us. To me, really. How I became the kind of person who could use someone so fundamentally good and convince myself it was justified. I don't have a complete answer, but I know now that I was measuring my worth by external markers, prestige, salary, status, because I was terrified that without them, I was nobody. And I projected that fear onto you. I convinced myself you were small because it made me feel bigger. I convinced myself you were stagnant because it made my growth seem more significant. I was wrong. About all of it. You were never beneath me. You were exactly where you wanted to be, doing work that mattered, building something sustainable and real. And I was so busy chasing the next impressive thing that I couldn't see the value in what you'd already built. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I lost. And I'm sorry for all of it. I hope you're happy, really happy. Not just successful or comfortable, but genuinely at peace with who you are and what you're building. You deserve that. Sarah. I read the email 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk. The river was calm that evening, reflecting the city lights like a liquid mirror. I walked along the trail thinking about Sarah's words, about whether they changed anything, about what forgiveness looked like when the damage had already been transformed into distance. I didn't write back that night, or the next day, or the day after that. But 2 weeks later, I sent a short response. Sarah, thank you for the email. I appreciate the honesty and the growth it represents. I don't know if I can forgive you completely. That kind of hurt doesn't just dissolve because someone apologizes. But I can acknowledge that you're trying, and that matters. I am happy, really happy. I'm building a life that fits me instead of trying to fit into someone else's idea of success. I hope you're finding the same. Be well. Marcus. I sent it and felt something release in my chest. Not closure exactly, but something close to it. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you've moved through something difficult without losing yourself in the process. 2 years after the divorce, I was invited to give a TEDx talk at the university. The topic, redefining success, when other people's metrics don't fit your life. I almost said no. Public speaking had never been my thing. I was comfortable in a classroom with students, but the idea of standing on a red circle in front of hundreds of strangers made my stomach churn. But Vanessa convinced me. You have something to say, she insisted, and people need to hear it. So I said yes, and I spent 3 months crafting a talk that was part confession, part lesson, part love letter to everyone who'd ever felt like they weren't enough. The day of the talk, I stood backstage while the organizer gave me last-minute instructions about blocking and timing and not going over my allotted 18 minutes. You'll be great, she said with the confidence of someone who hadn't read my speech and didn't know I was about to expose the most painful parts of my life to an auditorium full of strangers. The lights dimmed. The audience quieted. The organizer gestured for me to take the stage. I walked out to that red circle and looked at the crowd, students, faculty, professionals, people with their own stories of being measured and found wanting. And I began. 5 years ago, my wife told her sisters that our marriage wouldn't last another year because I was falling below her level. They all agreed. They laughed. And I stood there in the kitchen with dessert plates in my hands, listening to the woman I'd supported through business school dismiss me as insufficient. The audience was absolutely silent. I walked out that night, filed for divorce, and spent the next 2 years rebuilding my understanding of what success actually means. Because here's what I learned. There's no such thing as levels. Not really. That's just a story we tell ourselves to justify looking down on people whose choices we don't understand. I talked for 18 minutes about the consulting business I'd built while being dismissed as unambitious. About the satisfaction of teaching versus the prestige of corporate work. About the difference between being successful and being valued. About how we let other people's measurements become our own until we can't remember what we actually wanted in the first place. My ex-wife thought I'd plateaued, I said near the end. But I hadn't plateaued. I'd arrived. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do, building exactly what I wanted to build. I just wasn't doing it in a way that looked impressive from the outside. And for a long time, I let her convince me that meant I was failing. I paused, looking out at the audience. But failure isn't about staying put. It's about abandoning yourself to meet someone else's expectations. It's about measuring your worth by someone else's broken ruler. The talk ended with a standing ovation. Not because I'd said anything revolutionary, but because I'd said something true. Something that resonated with everyone who'd ever felt like they weren't enough. Afterward, people lined up to talk to me. Students who felt pressured to pursue careers they didn't want. Professionals who'd chased prestige until they forgot why. Parents who'd judged themselves by their children's achievements instead of their own contentment. One woman, probably in her 50s, shook my hand with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "My daughter keeps telling me I wasted my potential by being a social worker instead of going to law school. You just helped me remember why I made the choice I did." "You didn't waste anything," I told her. "You just chose meaning over status. That's not failure. That's wisdom." She hugged me then, this stranger who'd seen herself in my story, and I realized this was what I'd been building toward all along. Not revenge, Not vindication. Just the truth, spoken clearly enough that people could use it as a mirror. 3 years after the divorce, I ran into Sarah at a coffee shop. Not the one where Amanda had told me about the affair. I'd stopped going there after the divorce. This was a new place, across town, the kind of neighborhood spot where nobody cared about Ethiopian beans or pour-over techniques. They just made decent coffee and left you alone. I'd come in for my usual Saturday morning routine. Coffee, newspaper, the comfortable solitude of being alone without being lonely. Sarah was standing at the counter when I walked in. We saw each other at the exact same moment. Had that awkward split second of decision about whether to acknowledge or pretend we hadn't noticed. She made the choice for both of us. Marcus. Hi. Sarah. How are you? Good. Really good, actually. She looked different. Softer around the edges. Less armored. You? Same. Good. We stood there in that peculiar limbo of people who used to know each other intimately and now were strangers who shared history. Your TEDx talk, she said. I watched it. It was really good. Thank you. And painful. To hear. Because I was exactly who you were talking about. I know. I'm sorry. Again. Still. Forever, probably. I nodded. I know that too. I'm not with Daniel anymore, in case you were wondering. I wasn't. But okay. I'm actually not with anyone. I've been spending the last year just figuring out who I am when I'm not performing for someone. When I'm not trying to prove I'm worthy of love. That's good work. It's hard work. She smiled slightly. But I guess you'd know about that. We stood there for another moment. The barista called my name. My coffee was ready. I should go, I said. Yeah, of course. She hesitated. Can I say one more thing? Sure. Thank you. For standing up to me. For not letting me get away with it. I needed that. I needed someone to show me that actions have consequences. That you can't just use people and walk away clean. You're welcome. Though I didn't do it for you. I know. That's what made it effective. She picked up her own coffee. Be well, Marcus. Really. You too, Sarah. We walked out in different directions, back to our separate lives, and I felt something I hadn't expected, gratitude. Not for what we'd had, but for what we'd taught each other. She'd taught me what I wouldn't accept, what I wouldn't compromise on, what I was worth when I stopped measuring myself by someone else's standards. And I taught her, maybe, that cruelty has costs, that you can't build a life on other people's diminishment. That success without character is just expensive emptiness. Or maybe she hadn't learned that at all. Maybe she'd just learned to perform apologetic humility the way she'd once performed confident ambition. But that wasn't my problem anymore. 5 years after the divorce, I woke up in my apartment to golden lights streaming through the windows. Not the apartment I'd moved into right after the divorce. I'd upgraded 2 years ago to a place with 3 bedrooms. One for me, one for my home office, one for the kid I was in the process of fostering. Jamal was 13, brilliant, and convinced he was going to fail at life because he'd failed 7th grade math. We were working on that conviction slowly, carefully, the way you rebuild something that's been systematically demolished. He was still asleep. Teenagers have their own relationship with time, so I made coffee and stood on the balcony watching the river turn from silver to gold in the morning light. Vanessa had asked me last week if I was happy. Really happy, not just content. I'd had to think about that, because happiness seemed like too small a word for what I felt. Too temporary. Too contingent on circumstances. What I felt was something else. Something more like peace with occasional spikes of joy. Like knowing who I was and being okay with that person. Like understanding that my life didn't need to be impressive to be meaningful. That teaching and mentoring and building something sustainable was enough. More than enough. My phone buzzed with a text from Melissa, my lawyer-turned-friend. Breakfast next week? I have a client who needs consulting on organizational culture. Thought of you. Definitely. Send me the details. The business had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. I had 5 consultants now, all former teachers who'd found their way into organizational development. We worked with schools, nonprofits, small businesses, places that needed help but couldn't afford the big firms. We made decent money. We did meaningful work. We got to use our teaching skills in different contexts. Sarah would probably still think it was small. Unimpressive. I'd learned to stop caring about that. Another text came through. This one from Marcus Jr., my nephew, Sarah's sister Amanda's son, who'd started coming to me for tutoring last year when he was struggling with physics. Uncle Marcus. Got an A on my test. Thanks for explaining momentum. Coach says it might help my football too. That's great. Come by this week, and we'll work on thermodynamics. You make physics sound cooler than it is. Physics is cool. You'll see. I smiled. It was funny how life circled back. How the family that had watched me get humiliated at that dinner party 5 years ago had slowly, carefully, started treating me like I mattered. Like I'd been impressive all along, and they'd just been looking at the wrong metrics. Amanda had actually apologized last Christmas. Really apologized, not the performative kind. I was wrong about you, she'd said. I thought success looked like my life. The big house, the wealthy husband, the luxury. But you've built something actually sustainable. Something that matters. I'm jealous, honestly. You could change things, I told her. Maybe. Someday. For now, I'm just trying to teach my kids better metrics than I learned. It was something. Jamal emerged from his room around 9, shuffling into the kitchen with the particular aggravation of a teenager who'd been woken by consciousness against his will. Morning, I said. Why are you so awake? He grumbled. Coffee. And being old. You're not old. 38 feels old some days. That's because you wake up at dawn like a retired person. I laughed. Fair. Want breakfast? Yeah. Can we have those pancakes again? Sure. But you're helping. We cooked together in comfortable quiet, the kind that comes from months of routine. Jamal measured ingredients while I heated the griddle. We'd gotten good at this, at existing together without pressure, at building trust through small consistent actions rather than grand gestures. My caseworker wants to know if you're still thinking about adoption, Jamal said casually, not looking at me. We talked about this before, the possibility of making this arrangement permanent. But he'd always deflected, made jokes, changed the subject. I am, I said carefully. If that's something you want, why would you want to adopt a kid who already failed a grade? There it was. The core wound. The belief that failure defined him. Because you didn't fail anything that matters. You struggled with math. That's not the same as failing at life. My mom thought it was. Your mom was dealing with her own stuff. It wasn't about you. He flipped a pancake with more aggression than necessary. Everyone thinks I'm going to end up like her. I don't. How do you know? Because I've seen you work. I've seen you persist. I've seen you choose to show up even when it's hard. That's not someone who's going to fail. That's someone who's going to succeed by metrics that actually matter. Jamal was quiet for a long moment. Then, do you think you could teach me about your business? The consulting stuff? You're interested in that? I'm interested in how you made people take you seriously. Everyone used to think you were just a teacher. Now people pay you to tell them how to run their organizations. How'd you do that? I thought about that question. About the long journey from being dismissed as insufficient to being valued for exactly what I was. I stopped trying to be impressive, I said. I started being useful, and I found people who could see the difference. That's it. That's it. Well, that and a lot of documentation. I smiled. We'll start your consulting education with Excel spreadsheets. That sounds boring. It is, but it's also powerful. Documentation is power. He considered this. Okay, but can we finish breakfast first? Deal. Later that afternoon, I sat at my desk working on a proposal for a new client while Jamal did homework at the kitchen table. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Chen? This is Dr. Patricia Huang from the university. You gave a TEDx talk a few years ago about redefining success. I did, yes. I'm calling because we're developing a new course for our business school, something on ethical leadership and personal values. We'd like you to teach it. I sat back in my chair. You want me to teach business school students? Specifically, I want you to teach them what you taught in that talk. That success without self-knowledge is just expensive emptiness. That you can't build something sustainable if you're measuring yourself by someone else's metrics. That's a pretty radical curriculum for a business school. I know. That's why we need someone who's lived it. Someone who can speak from experience about what happens when you choose meaning over prestige. Who can show them that there's more than one path to a worthwhile life. I thought about Sarah sitting in a business school classroom, learning about leverage and strategy and how to maximize value. Learning all the wrong lessons. I'd be honored, I said. Excellent. Can you start in the fall semester? Absolutely. We talked logistics for a few more minutes, then hung up. Jamal looked up from his homework. Who was that? The university. They want me to teach a course on ethical leadership. That's cool. It's very cool. Are you going to tell them about your ex-wife? Probably. It's a good example of what not to do. Do you still hate her? I thought about that question. About Sarah at the coffee shop, softer and apologetic. About the version of her that existed in my memory, cruel and dismissive. About the truth somewhere between those two extremes. No, I said. I don't hate her. I just don't think about her much anymore. That's probably worse. For her, I mean. Maybe. Or maybe it's just honest. Jamal nodded, accepting this, and went back to his homework. I went back to my proposal. And somewhere across town, in whatever life Sarah had built from the ruins of ours, she was probably doing the same. Building, moving forward, learning, or not learning, from the casualties of her ambition. It wasn't my problem anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. That evening, I stood on my balcony watching the sunset turn the river to liquid gold. Jamal was inside gaming with friends online, his laughter drifting through the open door. The consulting business was thriving. The teaching position at the university would start in 3 months. The foster-to-adoption paperwork was progressing. My life looked nothing like what I'd imagined at 28 when I married Sarah. It looked nothing like success by her metrics, but by mine, by the measurements that actually mattered, it was everything. I thought about that dinner party 5 years ago, about standing in the kitchen hearing my wife tell her sisters I wasn't good enough, about the way they'd all agreed, the way they'd laughed. I thought about the wedding ring I'd set on the table, the words I'd said, why wait a year? Let's end it now. In that moment, I'd felt like I was falling, like I'd jumped off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. But I hadn't fallen. I'd learned to fly, not in the dramatic way, not with fanfare or applause, just in the quiet, persistent way of someone who refused to measure his worth by someone else's broken ruler. The sun disappeared below the horizon, taking its gold light with it, leaving behind the deep blue of evening. Behind me, Jamal called out, "Marcus, can we order pizza? I'm done with homework and starving." "Sure," I called back. "The usual? Can we try that new place? The one with the weird toppings." Weird is subjective. Pineapple on pizza is objectively weird. That's fair, but we're trying it anyway. His laugh echoed through the apartment, warm and real and entirely unimpressed by prestige or status or any of the metrics Sarah had spent years chasing. I walked back inside, closing the balcony door behind me, leaving the river and the sunset and the past where they belonged. Behind me, not forgotten, just finished. And ahead? Ahead was a teenager who needed guidance and pizza, was a course to design and students to teach, was a business to run and a life to build. Was all the quiet, unimpressive, deeply meaningful work of being exactly who I was meant to be. No levels, no hierarchy, just worth, measured by the right ruler at last. I ordered the pizza, yes, with pineapple, because Jamal needed to learn that weird isn't bad, and sat down at the table where my foster son was explaining the intricacies of his video game with the passion of someone who hadn't yet learned to be embarrassed by his enthusiasms. "See, the key is resource management," he was saying. "Everyone thinks it's about fighting, but really it's about knowing what you have and using it wisely." "That's a good life lesson," I said. "It's a good video game lesson. But yeah, I guess it works for life too." We ate pizza and talked about nothing important, and somewhere in the middle of that ordinary evening, I realized I'd stopped waiting. For 5 years, I'd been waiting for Sarah to see me, to value me, to understand what she had. Then I'd spent 2 years waiting to feel okay again. Waiting to stop being angry, waiting to rebuild. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I was just living, and it turned out that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.